Hey, if you're watching this, be sure to leave a comment on what kind of games you'd like to see me play on stream. Recently, I played Aliens vs Predator on the game's hardest difficulty, so if you'd like to see more stuff like that, be sure to let me know. As of this recording, I'm considering streaming a couple titles, including A Night in the Woods, Dead by Daylight, Team Fortress 2, and even a fun idea I had where I let my stream chat build my Skyrim character. That's enough of that though, how about we talk about FNAF? Lately, there has been a ton of new content in relation to Five Nights at Freddy's Ruin. I took security breach out of the name there because honestly I hate the two subtitles thing. I do the same thing with Curse of Dreadbear sometimes. Anyway, I'm sure that by now you've heard a lot about the Mimic. The Mimic is our new main villain. He's a robot that mimics what he sees. At some point he may have seen William Afton killing people, and thus, that's what he wants to do too. However, there is another side to the story that's gone mostly undiscussed since Ruin's release. This is probably simply due to the hype surrounding the Mimic character finally being actually revealed to us, but I do feel like people are missing a huge part of the Mimic story that simply can't be ignored. It's the through line, the story element that connects Help Wanted, Special Delivery, Security Breach Ruin, and eventually Help Wanted 2. That through line isn't a single entity, but instead a single string of code. What is it? Mimic 1, or as we're going to be calling him throughout the video, Tiger Rock. Tiger Rock is a character that's first introduced to us in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story of the same name. What is he? Well, he's a white tiger glamrock animatronic whose most notable feature include his eyes being two different colors, one blue and one green. Unlike the other glamrocks, Tiger Rock never appears in the game because he's never actually existed physically, only appearing in one of the Pizzaplex's VR attractions. Tiger Rock as an entity acted as a tour guide for the Pizzaplex 10 years in the future, leading the main character of the story around by holding his hand. Eventually, Tiger Rock grabs him a little too hard, and the main character, named Kai, tries to run away. Eventually, Kai leaves the VR booth, but begins to notice something strange. He has these frequent hallucinations, seeing an owl with white feathers and the same colored eyes as Tiger Rock, then a cat with similar features. Even his school's clock had Tiger Rock's face. These hallucinations intensify, and Kai confuses the stairs at his school with one of the escalators from the Pizzaplex. He falls down them and winds up in the nurse's office. At home, Kai is being watched over by his sister, Malia, who leaves 5 of her plush toys with him to keep him company in his room. While Tiger Rock watches from inside the closet, Kai is pinned down by the plushies and panics. In this panic though, he manages to see a wall of the VR booth and leaves, discovering he had been in the VR booth for a mere 5 hours. Kai then goes home with the story ending with him in bed, but in a very Friday the 13th fashion, Tiger Rock leaps through the window, pulls him out of his bed, and tears Kai's arms off before leaving him to die. That's all of the Tiger Rock story itself, but Tiger Rock as a character goes far deeper than what this story tells us. On its own, I would consider this one of the best Tales from the Pizzaplex stories, with a huge focus on the blend between reality and virtual reality. If you can be hurt in VR, is it even still VR? The end of this story also makes it seem like Kai never actually makes it out of the booth. Rather, he was stuck inside permanently and died. Either that, or his hallucinations became so strong that he believed Tiger Rock was real and was killing him. Essentially, we've got ourselves a VR Freddy Krueger. But wait, I called him Mimic 1 earlier. Where did that come from? Well, in order to explain that, we need to talk about the Storyteller, something that appears prominently at the beginning of the Tiger Rock story. The Storyteller isn't really an attraction at the Mega Pizzaplex, so much as it is a computer that also serves as decor. It's in the shape of a baobab tree, and is connected to every machine in the Mega Pizzaplex, dispensing orders and commands to make sure everything is running smoothly. This sort of centralized computer was massively unpopular with staff, and ended up hiving off quite a few of them since it was being used to write showtime routines and do other jobs that would normally be done by human workers. However, it saved the entertainment chairman of Fazent, Mr. Burroughs, a lot of money. Being this greedy, callous businessman, Burroughs really bought into the Storyteller. Also on the board is Edwin Murray, who you may recognize as the creator of the Mimic. Now at 64 years old, Murray is put in charge of creating the baobab tree that would house the Storyteller's computer. There's one problem. Even though Edwin wants to go inside the tree himself, Burroughs tells him no, that only certain people would be allowed in there. So, Edwin waits late one night in Monte Golf and watches as several men approach the Storyteller, one of them carrying a tiger head. This freaks Edwin out a lot, and when he goes to confront Burroughs about what kind of program they're using in the Storyteller, Burroughs shuts him down and tells him it's a simple template program that's designed to take existing stories and rearrange their parts for arcade games, VR games, and AR games. This answer does not sit well with Burroughs. Eventually one night, he manages to break into the Storyteller and finds that the tiger head has been mounted inside with 4 arms jutting from its neck. It also finds a computer terminal that is running a program titled Mimic 1. Edwin's response? It's happening again. Over the course of 5 nights, Edwin repeatedly goes back to the Storyteller to try and fix it, but that's when other problems begin to rise. The Storyteller has been affecting how the different animatronics behave and act. Roxy used to tease people in animatronics, but lately she's been much more cruel and aggressive with her insults. Glamrock Chica is supposed to be gluttonous and loves eating, but now she also has an obsession with attention, always clamoring for it. Monty straight up becomes violent. Eventually though, Burroughs notices a bizarre change in Glamrock Freddy. Freddy gets into a bit of a fight with a little girl over a vintage Freddy plushie, and eventually gives up and begins crying in the corner. This is especially unusual to Burroughs, who then decides to take action. The next time Edwin sneaks in, Burroughs locks him inside. Over the course of a week though, Burroughs begins to worry since Edwin never cried for help or pounded on the door to get someone to let him out. When Burroughs finally goes to check, he finds Edwin dead on the floor, surrounded by construction paper with the words "I'm sorry" written on them, as well as some stick figures. Burroughs tries to leave, but then finds that he's been locked in now too. Burroughs panics and tries to break the door open, then thinks if he can somehow destroy the Storyteller, someone will realize it and try to free him. He unplugs the Storyteller and tries to destroy the tiger head to no avail. Even without power, the Storyteller remains operational. The story ends with Burroughs' fate being sealed, although we never actually hear that he's died. It's worth noting though that we do eventually hear that the Storyteller had been taken down and removed from the Pizzaplex, which is why it's never seen in Security Breach. So to briefly sum up, Tiger Rock exists as a completely VR animatronic, but there's also a Tiger Rock head which seems to be the true identity of the Storyteller. The head is real, but the full animatronic is not. So what gives? And what really is the relation to the Mimic? Well, what if I told you that Tiger Rock is the connecting fiber of everything? One thing of note is that the Mimic, as explained in the epilogue books, seems to be very burnt, as if it had been through some kind of fire. Whether this is the FNAF 3 fire, the Pizza Sim fire, or some other fire we had not witnessed is unknown. But what's important to note is that by the time we actually see the Mimic in the epilogues, it's commented that its head seems newer than the rest of its body, implying that it had been replaced at some point in time. This, I think, is how we wind up with Tiger Rock. The reason Edwin panics when he realizes that the new animatronic head is a white tiger is because when he created the Mimic, the object it became fixated on was a white tiger toy that Edwin had made for it to emulate how his son David would play with his own white tiger plush toy. That white tiger became a part of the Mimic's identity. This is why so many people were quick to connect the Mimic to Tiger Rock. So let's say that at some point before Security Breach, the Mimic removes its head. After all, Edwin had damaged it during a beating he gave it in the Mimic story. The Mimic then replaces that head with the head we see him have in Ruin. But then where did this separate head go? Well, that's where we need to consider Help Wanted. As we know, the developers of the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience were given circuit boards and parts to help program in pathfinding. It was supposed to make things easier for them, and this head that they salvaged from the Mimic seemed perfect for that. So they scan the Mimic's head, and inadvertently infect their game with Mimic 1, taking the form of the game's main villain, William Afton. The end result is Glitchtrap, who it should be noted is wearing the same kind of suit we see the Mimic favor in Ruin, stitched together plush suits, as opposed to segmented ones we're used to in the series. However, Fazbear Entertainment, and most likely Edwin, realizes that something terrible is happening. This is where the Storyteller line, "It's happening again," comes into play. What happens in the Storyteller? Fazbear Entertainment uses Mimic 1 to try and make things easier, only for things to go terribly wrong when Mimic 1 manifests itself and corrupts the program. That line in the Storyteller tells me that it's not the first time Edwin had seen this happen, which is why I think it's what happened in Help Wanted. Fazbear Entertainment then tries to simply take the Mimic circuit boards back and move on, but the damage has already been done. It's then that Glitchtrap, maybe in an effort of survival, decides to move into the mind of Vanessa and become Vanny. One thing of note is that the men who move the Tiger Rock head into the Storyteller are most likely members of the security team, which we know Vanessa/Vanny would be in charge of. This may actually be the reason why Vanessa was placed in such a position, so that she could move the Mimic's head into the Pizzaplex. By now, The actual mimic with a new head, most likely given to it by Faz-N, is brought to the Pizzaplex. After all, they own it, why not use it? The mimic ends up trapped down in the Pizzaplex's basement, while its original head is corrupting all the machinery up above. Eventually, the Storyteller is destroyed, but by then, the damage has already been done. Mimic 1, or Tiger Rock, had been moved into the system, using Vanny as its connection to the real world, while it wreaked havoc across every animatronic, every computer, and every device in the Pizzaplex. The only question remaining for me then is what happened to this Tiger Rock head? And furthermore, what's next? Well, we know that the Storyteller was taken down and removed, but we never hear of it being destroyed. Chances are, unless something is specifically pointed out to have been destroyed, it will come back. This is where Help Wanted 2 comes into the picture. I've already stated I believe we will be seeing Mimic 1 return in this game, but something specific about it that I want to bring up is that Burroughs makes a point of saying it in the story. The Storyteller would have an influence on VR, AR, and arcade games. So if Help Wanted 2 really is an employee training sim like I hypothesized, or some kind of VR attraction at the Pizzaplex, then we can definitely expect that when we see Mimic 1 in this game, he'll show up as Tiger Rock. At the end of the day, I really think that Tiger Rock, although they're technically just a form of Mimic 1, is one of my favorite new antagonists of the FNAF series. But the idea that this specific character is going to represent the Mimic in the virtual world, I really think it works to sort of separate the two. But what's worth noting is that by the time of Ruin, most likely Mimic 1, and by extension Tiger Rock, is gone. With the defeat of Princess Quest 3 and Vanessa being freed from Vanny's corruption, it seems like Mimic 1 has been defeated, leaving just the Mimic down in the Pizzaplex's basement as the final threat. So while Help Wanted 2 could, as a prequel, send us back in time to before the Pizzaplex is open, I think any stories after Ruin will most likely not have Glitchtrap, Mimic 1, or Tiger Rock return. His reign of terror started and ended in the virtual world, but it had some real-world repercussions that I don't think can be overstated. And who knows? Maybe Mimic 1 is still out there. Tiger Rock could be waiting to come back at any point, with the Mimic beside him, or even wearing him. Until then, I'm DMuted. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.